to speak with you all today. To begin in a good way, I'd love to open with a land acknowledgement. And I recognize that we are all coming into this virtual space from various parts of the world. I don't know all where you are. I imagine most of us are in Alberta. I am not today. I happen to be across the country in Quebec for a conference at Bishop's University. And so my land acknowledgement today will really situate me here in this location. But I really invite everyone to reflect as I share this land acknowledgement on your own relationship to the land where you're located and how you are engaged in working towards a reconciliation in relationship with the Indigenous peoples and the lands where you are located. So Bishop's University, where I am today, is located on the traditional territory of the Abenaki people, the people of the rising sun. We acknowledge their stewardship and appreciate that we are all guests on Abenaki territory. As I have learned since I arrived here, this is not treaty territory. The Abenaki people have asked that we not refer to this land as unceded, although it wasn't ceded. But they do not use that language because they do not believe that land can be owned or transferred in ownership. And so they speak about how they belong to the land. And so I think this is a very helpful reminder for us to think about our relationship with land and the ways that we have, in colonial terms, commodified land and stolen land and possessed land. And what can we do to counteract those violences and those acts of species supremacy? And so I'm really reflecting on that as I learn this lesson once again from the Abenaki people. And so I'll leave it there, and I will introduce myself as part of this and then pass it to my co-presenters to introduce themselves. So my name is Julie Mooney. I am an Irish and Scottish Canadian settler. I grew up in the city of Ottawa on Anishinaabe and Algonquin territory. And I currently live and work in the city of Calgary, Treaty 7 territory, the home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai, as well as the Arhi Nakota Nations, Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the homeland of the Métis Nation of Alberta. And I am a grateful and uninvited guest to that land, which I feel very much that I belong to. So over to you, Aubrey.
Thanks so much to Edna. Thanks to Anita and this whole team, for everybody for hosting us. Thanks to Julie for that introduction. It's so nice to be here. I am Aubrey Hanson. It's really an honor to meet. I see a few familiar faces in the room, and I'm just really excited to be in this shared learning space. Like, we are guests in your EDNA space. So thank you so much. I am a member of the Otipemisiwak Métis government here in Alberta, the Métis Nation of Alberta. My family comes from Red River Métis communities. Some of my Métis family names are Swain, Breland, Dauphiné, and Grant. I also have mixed Euro-settler ancestry, and as was already said, I'm an associate professor at the University of Calgary's Werklund School of Education, and I'm here with my co-presenter, collaborator, co-conspirator, Dr. Patricia Danyluk. So I'll pass it over to Trish to introduce herself.
Thank you, Aubrey. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Patricia Danyluk, and also an associate professor at Werklund. Just to situate myself, I will say that I grew up in Treaty 5 territory in northern Manitoba in a remote community. And after I went to university, I came back and I worked in the most remote Indigenous communities in Canada for many years, and then went on to work with Indigenous communities in Ontario, Saskatchewan, and now I am in Alberta, and very happy to be here. So thank you for welcoming us today.
Okay, and I will share my screen and get us started. We have a pretty quick presentation for you today, but one that we're very excited to share. And we will have time for a little Q&A at the end as well. Okay, and I love, you know, I don't know how many presentations I've done in my life. I actually love that I still get nervous. You folks are making me nervous. Okay, I'm making myself nervous. You don't have to take responsibility for that. Okay, so here, can everybody see my slides? Our slides?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we introduced ourselves. That's great. And okay, this is me. So we're going to kind of fly through the information part so that we can have a little bit of a demonstration as well as some discussion. So bear with us as we scoot through our brief presentation on using talking circles in online environments and in teaching and learning. And the first thing that I think we would really want to emphasize is that we are here to talk about teaching and learning and the possibility of kind of bridging or broaching a relational space between a talking circle and teaching and learning practices. But we're not here to share kind of ceremonial teachings or to, you know, kind of impart Indigenous knowledges in a deep way. And one of the first things we would really say is that the practice of a talking circle is something that opens kind of a relational space between Indigenous knowledge systems, Indigenous ways of knowing, being, doing, relating, and teaching and learning spaces, which often happen in Western institutions or in a classroom that has historically been shaped by Eurocentric and colonial values, knowledges, and practices. So for that relational space to be an ethical one, it's really up to us as educators to be in relation with Indigenous communities and knowledges. So using a talking circle in the classroom is an opportunity to get into that relational space and do that in a good way. So when we're talking about talking circles today, we're not talking about doing like a sacred sharing circle in kind of a ceremonial way in the classroom, or trying to certainly not appropriate kind of a knowledge holder or elder or ceremonial role. We're talking about finding a way to enter into a talking circle practice as a pedagogical approach, but it always needs to be done in an ethical way, in a relational way. And one of the best, I would say, just kind of wise practices for doing that is to work with, depending on your own positionality, to work with an Indigenous knowledge holder, community member, maybe an elder if that's somebody you have kind of in your circle of relationships, or if your institution does, that could be a space to bridge that sense of relationship to do the work in a good way. Did I miss anything, Trish, on that first slide?
No, all good.
I guess I could talk about the shiny red book in the picture. This is I first learned about talking circles in the classroom from a Métis prof I had in my own master's degree, and this is a book we used in the class. And this book offers quite a bit more about how to work in circle in an educational space. Go ahead, Trish.
Thank you. Okay, well, we've all found ourselves increasingly teaching online, and this was especially true during COVID when we first wrote about this practice. And what we found is that it really offers a different way to structure your lesson. It allows you to hear from students and allows the students to hear a variety of perspectives. As they engage in reflection, they begin to feel a sense of being connected and belonging in that space. It also increases the amount of time that they spend interacting with you, which has been shown to reflect positively on enjoyment scores in courses. Especially online, it can feel, sometimes we feel a little bit isolated, and this decreases that sense of isolation with online learning and the disconnection you sometimes feel, because it connects everyone. We're talking to each other. Also, we write about in our article how this can be used as a form of assessment, both diagnostic and formative.
Yeah, and I just add a little mini story that I know I've heard colleagues talk about their experience of teaching online as, you know, talking to a bunch of empty black squares. And that hasn't been my experience because we have cameras on and people are coming in to face each other in the circle. So it feels a little bit more relational. So Trisha's going to talk a little bit about the importance of following protocols.
Thanks, Aubrey. So remember, when you're using a talking circle, that you want to follow the pedagogy of the land, of the people whose land you are on at that time. I've done this in Ontario, and I know that in parts of Ontario, there's a different way of doing this. And then, of course, here in Calgary, there's also a unique way of doing that. So you really have to think about that before you enter into doing this. Some of the common principles that are in this slide here are that the speaker is not to be interrupted, and that the members of the circle do not offer responses. So they are listening, which is something that we rarely do for long periods of time. So it creates a unique experience. The person that has the object has the right to speak, and it's usually a natural object arising from nature that means something to the person that is hosting the circle. And some things to consider is that this is something that does take time to do properly. And so you have to plan for it. And students also have to be careful too of respecting the time of everyone in the classroom. I know I've been in situations where someone talks a lot and other people just talk very little. So sometimes it's good to remind students of that. And of course, people have the right to pass, and it could be something going on in their life that day and they just don't feel like participating in that circle. And that should be allowed without any negative consequences. So you can see that, that we have a slide here, and that's from Talking Circles, First Nations Pedagogy Online. Thanks, Aubrey. Over to you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks so much. Okay, so why would people want to use the talking circle? I know for me as a Métis person and really trying to be reclaiming and learning and practicing my own ways of being in the academy, I find it a lovely natural way. And it's, in some ways I do this so much in my classroom now. I find it funny to have a discussion I'm like, what is this? We just all talk randomly? Like, I kind of like the structure now, but I feel like, I teach a lot of people who are pre-service teachers coming into, taking our Indigenous education course. And this gives them, I feel like, a really accessible way to think, not just about what they're teaching in the classroom, but how. And it's kind of an invitation, like working in circle. There's a lot of learning to be done. I still, every time I read this book, I learn something new. Every time I do a talking circle that's led with someone else, I learn something new, and there's an invitation to engage more deeply with Indigenous knowledges. So, for those who are kind of accountable to the teaching quality standard in Alberta, for instance, they can say, oh, I'm developing and applying my knowledge of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. That's a broad category, of course. The talking circle practice might be very different among different peoples, but it's an opportunity to step into that knowledge space of, yes, I'm learning about Indigenous education. I'm trying to be accountable to the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. As an educator, like, I want to decolonize my classroom. I want to do something, and it can be a really great place to begin and to deepen the learning, because it does invite deeper understanding. I also find for myself, one of the things I really notice as an educator when I work in circle with a class is not like I'm the teacher, they're the buckets, I know stuff, I'm filling the buckets. It's not like that at all. Together, we are building a whole sense of what we can come to know together. I really love listening to like one of my teachers, or people I've been listening to in my life, is Lee Merkel, who's a Stalo educator, storyteller, writer, knowledge holder. She worked at University of Toronto for a while. And she's written she spoke actually in her oratories, which have also been written down, about, you put an object of study in the center of the circle and everyone has their own perspective on it. And together we can kind of go around and build knowledge around that object of study. And I find the depth and breadth of knowledge that we come to as a full class, when everyone has a say, everyone shares their perspective, is really incredible. And that, that models holism. We're creating something that is bigger than the sum of its parts. And the understandings are more diverse, more rich, more layered. I do this with graduate students. I do this with undergraduate students, and I learn something every time we come together in circle. Whereas if I were just kind of up there saying, la, here's what we need to know. And of course, like, I don't think, like, nobody's just doing that kind of teacher-centered directive, just instruction. We're always doing different kinds of diverse ways of co-constructing knowledge together. But a circle is a beautiful way to really give everyone a chance to speak. And, often those kind of thoughtful, quiet folks who don't necessarily feel ready to jump in can have that opportunity. They can still pass, but if they're given a spot when it's that now's your time to talk, they will often chime in and have something really thoughtful to say. It also does foster a sense of interconnectedness in the classroom that can be hard to get otherwise, where everybody belongs, everybody makes up the whole. We make space for that circle. I do it every week with my classes. And it builds a sense of community, and literally sitting in a circle builds a sense of community. There's nothing between us. Our knees are pointing at each other. You can, they get comfortable, they put their laptops away, and they can just kind of relax. I get student feedback saying things like, I've never learned so much just listening. And, I put my laptop aside and I can just listen in this class and I learn so much, because they're really taking it in with their whole selves, or much of their whole selves. We don't always necessarily feel whole every class, every day, but they have that opportunity to be authentic and be in the learning space together. And I find that in an online environment, again, is particularly valuable. So it really opens up the online learning space in a relational way that I've had, I sometimes I doubt it, but it's really powerful. The students tell me over and over, and tell us, because Trish and I've taught a lot of the same classes, it creates a sense of community and connection. And the circle does that. The circle's powerful. So the more I learn about that, the more I'm humbled by it, to be honest. Trish, do you want to add anything about why we do talking circles?
Sure. I think I'll wait until you start to add the names, Aubrey, and then I'll talk.
Okay. Yes, good point. So we're going to do a very, very brief demonstration of what this can look like in the online environment. So very quickly, if we could just ask for 4 people who are willing to pop up and speak in the circle. If you could just pop your name in the chat, we'll just kind of choose the first 4 volunteers. And I'm actually going to just stop sharing while I do the messy work of popping people into my little image. So if you don't mind, pop your names in the chat, and then I will. I'm going to sign you up. And the question that we're going to ask you as volunteers is to respond to is, why might you use a talking circle as pedagogy online? And of course, we just have a little bit of time, so this is going to be like a 1-sentence answer. Okay, so thank you for volunteering, and Trish is going to share some.
Yeah, well, while you're doing that, Aubrey, I'll just say, one of the things I noticed when I started doing this in an online environment is that starting the class in this way, students immediately overcame their reluctance to speak. Especially in an Indigenous ed class, you have a variety of people with different knowledges. And so they're often afraid to speak out in case they're wrong or something like that. But right away, students were in the circle and they were responding to whatever we were asking at that point. And so it gets everyone talking, and it increases that sense of belonging, I think, in the classroom. And that really shifts the way the course goes from then on. You know, I think what we've mentioned many times, it enhances the sense of community. It also allows me to conduct a little diagnostic assessment for those of you who are into assessment. And I can figure out where people are with this topic and adjust my teaching accordingly. And during COVID, of course, we used it as a form of wellness check-in, really, like how are you doing? And so it was good for that, especially when people were really isolated. So I see that Aubrey has the circle ready, so I'll just stop talking.
No, and the reminder of the pandemic era, Trish, for sure. So we're going to do this very quickly. So just a few words each, because we are close on time. And I would do the same in a classroom. I would let people know just kind of a rough expectation, because we are usually compromising kind of colonial time, as people call it, like the class ends at X o'clock. That means we only have about a minute each to speak or so. So I will give my students that parameter. In real life, it would just go as long as it needed to, maybe. But we're often bound by these structures. So today, just a few words each. Why might you use a talking circle as pedagogy online? And the way we're going to go clockwise. In honor, here in Blackfoot territory, we go clockwise. So we'll start with Trish. We'll go to Nicole, Jen, Julie, Tamara, Sarah, Aubrey, and we'll be done. All right, so this is just a brief little demonstration of how the circle can work in an online environment. So we'll just have one person speak at a time. Go ahead. So we'll get started. Trish, why might you use a talking circle as pedagogy online?
Thanks, Aubrey. I believe it shifts the whole dynamic of the class from one, as Aubrey mentioned, where you're talking to people, where you're all sharing knowledge. Over to Nicole.
I think that it would bring, you've already said many of these things, but it would bring so much more diversity and perspective from all the different people in the courses that I teach. And also it gives people that chance to share their thoughts, where if you have just a shorter period of time, maybe some other people, they just don't speak out.
I might use a talking circle for inclusion and holistic care of the individual in whatever we're teaching that day for content.
I would use a talking circle online in a similar way that I would use it if I were in person. And that is as a method of decolonizing my teaching practices. When it's in person, the circle itself, the shape communicates a change in relationship from hierarchy, where the teacher's at the front standing up and the students are facing the teacher sitting down, to where everyone is sitting down facing each other and everyone can make eye contact with each other. And so I would want to emphasize the benefits of that in-person circle in an online space. So I would actually have everyone turn their cameras on during circle in an online space, and invite people to really engage with each other as equals, as every contribution to the circle conversation is of equal value.
And I would use the circle, talking circle, as a way to have all my students receive a voice, and that growth of self-worth, that what they say is important to all of us. And importance in that voice is we're all there listening, because I feel sometimes some students who talk a lot, and there's some students who don't get a voice, and this gives everybody that voice and allows for equity in your classroom.
I'm thinking of using talking circles as I teach about, well, teach students that are in their practicum, and I do the seminar portion, just to hear more about what they're experiencing in the field, and then and as a way to kind of talk about those topics that I don't want to do a lot of teaching around, but I just want to do some reflection as the group with the group.
Yeah, and for me, I've found in terms of building relationship in the classroom, it has been a really incredible teacher for me. I keep learning from this practice and pedagogy that in terms of the learning we need to do, especially because I'm always teaching in Indigenous education, it's really not about the content. It's really about my students finding who they are and their own relationship with what we're doing and how we're doing it with each other, with the classroom space, with their teacher identity, all of those things, all of those relationships, and with their future students of diverse backgrounds. So that relationship is really embodied in the circle and taught in the circle in a way that's very different from learning about it cognitively. So it really, a lot of my teachers have talked about moving the learning from the head to the heart. And I find that it also has to move from the head to the body, and the circle helps teach us that as well, and nourishes the learning spirit in the classroom. That'd be my reason. So our rock has gone all the way around. Everyone has had a chance to speak. So that was our circle demonstration. Thanks so much for people's participation. And we also have just a brief list of references for you. And Trish, do you want to talk about, I think we've already shared some resources, but just what we're pointing people towards with those documents that they will have access to as well? Because you mentioned our article.
Yes, thanks for that, Aubrey. I'm just gonna look here. We have written 2 articles. Yeah, here's one. It's Hanson and Danyluk, Talking Circles as Indigenous Pedagogy in Online Learning. And then we have a shorter version of this on our PRISM website, which I'll just post a link in the chat to.
Yeah, awesome. And we just wanted to make sure we're sharing resources with you. And so that's it for our presentation part. So I think now we have time for some Q&A.